I am honored to offer this tribute to our longtime colleague, John Stephen McClure. I distinctly remember the first time I met John. It was at an Academy of Homiletics meeting. I was at an offbeat restaurant sitting by myself when two people came up desperately looking for a table, John Holbert and John McClure. After only a few minutes, I was intrigued by the fact that we had here a Presbyterian from the South, Birmingham, who identified himself as a Northern Presbyterian, whose father was pastor of a pocket of progressive Presbyterianism in the heart of Birmingham, Alabama, the Independent Christian Church, Independent Presbyterian Church. I visited that congregation a few years ago and discovered why John is so tall. When he was an acolyte, he had to be tall in order to perform his function. And not only was he a Northern Presbyterian from the South with a progressive spirit, but he was 3 times state wrestling champion in the high schools of Alabama. I thought to myself, well, that's going to bring an interesting dimension to our work groups. John had grown up there. He went to school at Sewanee. He did an MA at Glasgow, where he lived in a condemned apartment building without the benefit of heat or running water. He did his theological degree at Fuller and completed the PhD at Princeton in 1983. A little-known chapter of John's life, and one that I hesitate to mention here, is that upon graduation from Princeton, he was interviewed by a significant Presbyterian seminary in the South. They were impressed, highly impressed, with his intellectual preparation, but suggested that 2 or 3 years in pastoral ministry might round out his approach to preaching, where many, I think including myself, would have been offended by such a verdict. John took it to heart and served a Presbyterian congregation, out of which has come many of the pastoral insights and dimensions to his heavily theoretical and important work. John taught for 17 years then at Louisville Presbyterian Theological Seminary, where his office was the size of a small basketball court, having been converted from a bedroom in a mansion that became the center of the campus during his tenure there. Following his years at Louisville, of course, he went to Vanderbilt, where he took the lead in establishing one of the most interesting PhD programs in preaching, and the first of its kind to work out of the practical theology model for doing things as expanded from the old technique into the more reflective practitioner theoretical model associated with that program today. One can notice among John's students a fierce loyalty to him as a teacher because of the amount of time that he has spent with each graduate student over these years. Many of us know John through his books, the first of which, The 4 Codes of Preaching, immediately established him as an authority in our field. I have to say, speaking candidly, I find the 4 Codes of Preaching only slightly less immediately accessible than Whitehead's Process and Reality. And John, one of your assignments in these next years is to produce a slimmed down classroom version that can be used alongside other books. And I say this because despite what many perceive as the intensity of the 4 Codes of Preaching, when you see John's students from that long 4 Codes era, they talk that language. They discuss sermons in those codes. And of course, with 11 titles, there are many more, not all of which I can mention in detail, but 2 of which I think show up more often than almost any other books, except perhaps the 4 pages and Tom Long's introduction in the literature of preaching. One of these, of course, is the Round Table Pulpit, which has had a shelf life that is remarkable and is a testimony to the nature of collegiality and common conversation that John tagged into when he generated that book. The other, of course, is Otherwise Preaching, which opened the Academy to the notion of otherness and the important dimensions of otherness that we need to take into account as we are thinking about our relationship to the text as other and also to the many human others and nature itself as an other that are a part of the preaching environment. I imagine every single one of us has preaching words on our desk for really immediate reference. And I did buy a Speaking Together with God and Liturgy. But John, I had to mortgage our house in order to get that book, but I'm sure over the long haul, we will benefit from it appropriately. Some know, not all, that John plays bass, and he plays bass in a band, and I am confident that this is the background of his book, Mash Up Religion, which should probably be entitled My Autobiography of What I Learned About Homiletics While Playing Bass in a Band on Friday Nights. No statement about John would be complete without a tribute to Annie, with whom he has developed a remarkable and genuine partner relationship over many different and some difficult years. No comment about John would also be complete without mentioning his remarkable collegial relationship and collaboration with Dale Andrews. They were colleagues both at Louisville and Vanderbilt. They co-edited Homiletic, but more than that, they shared a deep common concern for the transforming power of the gospel to come to expression through preaching. Dale entered into the larger life of God much too early. John, we thank you for the ways in which your collaboration eventuated not only in specific works, but provided a model for many of us in the way we could and should be developing relationships with others. I close this tribute with two incidents which speak for me of John's character and commitment. Some years ago, he was on the board that was directing the study Listeners for Listening, and his son, Ian, was playing basketball at Washington and Lee University. As the season had gone on, Ian had scored more three-pointers than almost anyone else in Washington and Lee history. When he got to 67, 68, and he would, with shot number 70, set the all-time scoring record at Washington and Lee, John was at a meeting of the board of this study in Indianapolis. We did, of course, stop the meeting and listen to the shot. And you would have thought the little room in which we were meeting was the gymnasium in which Ian made the shot for all the energy and noise. But such a commitment to the church, to scholarship, and to the gospel that one would be in a place other than that gymnasium for that shot says so much about John. And one final thing, so personal. I was on a trip to California where I had gone to give some lectures, but where my real agenda was to get to the beach. And I received a phone call in my room at night. It was John. Vanderbilt had opened its search for someone to follow David McClure. Vanderbilt had opened its search for someone to follow David Buttrick. John wanted to know if I was interested. If I were making application, he would not. Now, gratefully, I knew I was not right for Vanderbilt, so I could say immediately no. But the respect, the community, the collegiality, the koinonia, I think this is the indelible mark that John McClure has left on me and on our academic community.